Spin Cycle America, the American Citizen's Handbook, Season 1, Episode 4, The Supreme Court, What It Does and What It Doesn't Do. Welcome to Spin Cycle America. I'm Coach. This isn't about political parties. This is about principle. It's about history, responsibility, freedom, and having honest conversations about the country we all call home. So let's get started. If you listen to political discussions today, you'll hear people talk about the Supreme Court all the time. The Supreme Court ruled this. The Supreme Court struck this down. The Supreme Court is conservative. The Supreme Court is liberal. But here is the question. What is the Supreme Court actually supposed to do? And perhaps, even more importantly, what is it not supposed to do? Do you actually know? Have you actually checked it out? Have you actually read the Constitution? Do you know what their job is? Today, we're going to go ahead and look at the highest court in the United States and its place in our constitutional system. What its job is. What are they supposed to do? What's their purpose? We're also going to look a little bit on some controversial situations, on what another party is actually wanting their platform to do with them. So we'll talk about that. So here's today's topic: the third branch of the government. The Constitution establishes three branches of the federal government. Article 1, Congress established. Article 2, the President. And then Articles 3, the federal judiciary system. The Supreme Court is the highest court in the federal judicial system. It's up there. It's the supreme daddy of them all. The founders separated these powers because they didn't want all governmental authority concentrated in one place. Makes sense, right? We don't want power to be concentrated in one power. Congress makes federal laws. The executive branch enforces the laws. The judicial branch interprets the law and resolves cases and controversies that covers or comes before the courts. So that's the basic structure. But there's an important distinction. The Supreme Court isn't supposed to simply decide whether something is good or bad, or it's a good idea or it's a bad idea. The job is to decide legal questions presented in actual cases and controversies. So here's the core role of the powers. So I think I mentioned this before in the past, but I'm going to kind of cover it again. Judicial review, the power to strike down laws, executive orders, or acts passed by Congress that violate the U.S. Constitution. And I want you to remember this because I'm going to cover something here in a second that is going to change or make you think just a minute. Appellate jurisdiction, the final authority to review and make decisions on appeal cases from lower federal appellate courts and state supreme courts. Original jurisdiction, limited first hearings for special matters such as disputes between different states. That's the Supreme Court's rules. That's their power. That's what they get to do. That's what they're supposed to do. However, let me explain something here. However, if the Democratic Socialists of America, the DSA, have their way or get power, here is their platform. And many of you have not read on this or know much about this. Even the people that are supporting the DSA or the Democratic Socialist Party, you guys haven't even read up on their platform or don't even know this. You just say, oh, yeah, we get free this or we get free health care. But is it really free? The DSA's proposal, the goal, the platform titled Workers Deserve More, seeks a major overhaul of the U.S. constitutional structure. So here's the deal. The Supreme Court, it proposes eliminating the current Supreme Court as it stands. So remember I mentioned something just a few minutes ago about the power the Supreme Court has. Judiciary replacement. So I told you it's going to eliminate the Supreme Court. So judiciary replacement, it would replace the judiciary system chosen by and made subordinate to the legislative branch, meaning Congress. It'd be underneath Congress. The presidency, the plan to seek to replace the presidency in its current form with an executive branch chosen by Congress. All other changes, the platform includes abolishing the U.S. Senate and moving toward a multi-party democratic system. This basically means that one party would control all. One person would control all. This is what our founding fathers did not want to happen. A single party control or single person control. This puts too much power or too much control into one person or party. And you can look to Venezuela as well as other countries to see how that turned out. How's that working out for them? So I'm going to explain this DSA to you here in just a few minutes more as to what I mean by how drastic that's going to change. So what does the Constitution say? So Article 3, Section 1 says this. The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court. Congress has authority under the Constitution to establish lower federal courts as well. The Supreme Court sits at the top of at the top of that system. They're over it all. They have the final say so. But the Constitution doesn't give the court unlimited power over every political disagreement in America. So they don't have total control, but they have the majority control. There are constitutional boundaries. So as long as you know and understand the Constitution, you're going to be all right. That's why I keep telling you every time we talk is to read the Constitution, learn a little bit about it, learn a little bit about history and what's going on. The judicial review. This is important. Okay, this is something that the DSA is going to do away with. All right, and this is very important. So I need you to listen to this part here very important, very intensely. All right, so one of the most important powers associated with the Supreme Court is judicial review. Judicial review is the authority of courts to determine whether government actions are consistent with the Constitution. So one of the landmark cases associated with this principle is Marbury versus Madison, decided in 1803. So that was that was a couple days ago, so to speak. All right. Chief Justice John Marshall and the courts established an important principle. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and the courts can refuse to enforce law that conflict with it. All right. So this became a fundamental part of the American constitutional system. So under the DSA, so listen to this very carefully. Under the DSA, there would be no judicial review. So in other words, nobody could challenge the courts. Their Supreme Court, which really there would be no existence of the Supreme Court, the courts would not be able to overturn laws passed by elected representatives. So the DSA would explicitly call for an end to judicial supremacy. meaning judiciary would lose its ultimate authority over the legislative branch. Elimination of judicial review. The DSA states that the elected Supreme Court uses judicial review to effectively create and abolish laws outside the legislative process. They intend to strip the court system of this specific power. The courts would have no power. There would be no use for the Supreme Court. So, with that being said, I want you to listen to the next couple of things I'm about to say and talk to you about. Okay? So, this is very important. The Supreme Court doesn't make the laws. We all know that. Okay? They don't make the law. This is an important distinction because Congress writes and passes federal legislation. The president signs and vetoes legislation and is responsible for enforcing federal laws. The Supreme Court decides cases. So cases go in front of the Supreme Court. You hear about that now. There's laws all the time. So I've given you guys kind of homework, so to speak, to go and look up different laws that are in front of the Supreme Court. When the court rules that a law or government action violates the Constitution, it is supposed to be creating a new law. It is determining whether the government acted within its constitutional boundaries. That distinction is important when we discuss controversial Supreme Court decisions. Okay, so now who chooses the justices? All right, so the Constitution provides a process involving two branches. So this is where it gets controversial, or arguments and fights and bickering and this type of stuff. So the President of the United States nominates the Supreme Court justices. Okay, and this is why you hear about packing the courts. You hear one side saying, well, we're going to pack the courts when we get in power. Well, is it really necessary to pack the courts? I mean, really, if the justices do their job, there should be no reason to pack the courts. If they read the Constitution the way it's supposed to be read and done, there should be no reason to pack the courts. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. There should be no reason to pack the courts. One way to get over that is to say there should be only this many Democrats and this many Republicans on the court and this many independents, and you're done. It'd be that simple. If there should be 3, 3, and 3. That would simplify it, I would think. But anyways, so the president nominates a Supreme Court justice. The Senate provides advice and consent through the confirmation process. That confirmation process takes a few days. Once confirmed, justices serve during what they call good behavior, which is traditionally meant lifetime tenure, unless they resign, retire, or are removed through impeachment or conviction, or otherwise leave office. Okay, the idea behind judicial independence is that judges should be able to interpret the law without constantly worrying about losing their position because of unpopular decisions. Some of the judges make unpopular decisions. They should not have to worry about looking over their shoulder. They are going to make unpopular decisions on the Democratic side and on the Republican side. It's going to happen. Who cares? Let them make their decision. As long as they stand by it. Now, as long as they use common sense when they're making that decision, we're good to go. You've heard some of them come out and say something that's off the wall, and you're like, really? Where'd you come up with that idea? So that doesn't mean judges are above criticism, like I just mentioned. It does, or it means the system gives them the degree of independence so they can perform their constitutional role. So, but under the DSA platform, there would actually be no need for the judicial branch of government. They would have no power at all. They wouldn't need them. So I'm wondering how, on hindsight, when these judges actually vote, if they actually vote on the Democratic side, or if they actually vote for a DSA candidate. Because if they actually read their platform. So think about it. So here's why this matters. The Supreme Court has decided some of the most controversial cases in American history. And this is what you really need to think about. If you gave all this power to one person or one group, and you're going to let them decide these laws or these cases, freedom of speech. Think about it. Over the last administration, we had this issue here going on. We had problems with this issue here. Freedom of speech, religious liberty, criminal procedures. We have right now criminals being released, not serving their time. Property rights, voting. We're having issues there right now. Federal power, civil rights. Think about that one. Separation of powers. All of these, and you tell me that having a single person running and being in charge of the government, if that's what we want. So think about that. So some decisions have been praised, and some decisions have been strongly criticized. So we've had people with these that I just mentioned say, yes, this is what I wanted, or yes, or no, this isn't what I wanted. Others have been strongly criticized. The Americans have always disagreed about the courts and will continue to disagree with them. But that's part of our constitutional system. It's going to happen. You can't please everybody. It'll never happen. The important thing is to understand the reasoning behind a decision rather than simply labeling it good or bad because we agree or disagree with the results. Learn to live with the result. It's going to happen. So here's history in a minute. The Supreme Court met in February for the first time in 1790. At the time, the court was far less prominent in American life than it is today. Over the centuries, its role and influence developed through constitutional interpretation and landmark cases. The court's history demonstrates something important. The Constitution establishes the framework, but generations of Americans have continued to debate what its words mean and how they apply to changing circumstances. Constitutional Corner. So Article 3, Section 1 states this. The judges both of the Supreme Court and inferior courts shall hold their office during good behavior. That provision is one of the foundations of judicial independence. That means that they can make decisions without having to worry about looking over their shoulders. So here's the verse of the day. He who states his case first seems right until the other comes and examines him. Proverbs, paragraph 18, verse 17. That's a powerful reminder for us all. Before we decide someone is right or wrong, we should hear the case. And that's on both sides of the aisle. Whether it's a Democrat or a Republican or even an independent, we need to hear the case on both sides to decide who is right or wrong and listen with our ears open. That's the only way we are going to be successful and be able to hold an intelligent conversation. Right now, you can hear the left or the right arguing. And are we actually using common sense? Maybe, maybe not. In most cases, I'm hearing lately, not. So here's the question of the day. Do you think the Supreme Court justices should interpret the Constitution according to its original meaning, or should constitutional interpretation change as society changes? Tell me why. Why or why not? Let's have a conversation respectfully. So here's my coach's homework for you. This week, look up one Supreme Court case you've heard about but don't fully understand it. Don't read someone else's opinion about it, because usually when you read somebody else's opinion about it, you either start to argue it or get upset. But find the actual case summary. Ask yourself these questions. What was the constitutional question? What did the court decide? Why did the court reach that decision? What did you agree with, or did you agree with the reasoning, and why not? And do you have, now again, you don't have to agree with the court decision. Nobody says you have to. This here just kind of gets you to start thinking about it. The goal is to understand it, not necessarily to always agree with it. So here's my final whistle, the coach's whistle. As a coach, I've learned that you can't always judge a play without looking at the rules. The same thing applies to the Constitution. Before we criticize the Supreme Court's decision, we should understand the constitutional question. The justices were asked to answer. You may disagree with the decision, that's your right. You may believe the court got it wrong, that's also your right. That's part of the American debate. But knowing the rules, knowing the fact, and understanding the reasoning makes your argument stronger. So don't just tell me what you believe, tell me why you believe it. So in closing, I want to leave you with this. So when you go to the polls to vote, think about this for 1 minute. And this is in my own opinion. Okay? Is anything really free? Do you really get something for free? Do you really get something for nothing? Think about the divisions or the decisions the Supreme Court has made. I'm sure you all have disagreed with a few, and you probably have agreed with them, as many of them as well. You have all heard the saying, you can't always have your cake and eat it too, which is true. Okay? This is the same way. Just because someone says you don't have to work, this is not always true. You have to be able to make money some way. Nobody's going to give you anything for free. You have to give something in life to get something. Nothing is for free in life. For example, free healthcare isn't going to be free. How is that going to be free? Or are you just paying higher taxes to help pay for that healthcare? Someone is paying for it. Who is? Is your neighbor paying that higher taxes for that healthcare so you don't have to work? Think about it. So I'm Coach. Thank you for joining me here on Spin Cycle America. Remember, this isn't about being perfect. It's about being responsible. It's about understanding where we came from, appreciating the freedoms we have, and doing our part to leave this country better for the next generation. Have a great day. Take care of yourself. Take care of your family. Take care of each other. God bless you, your family, and may God continue to bless the United States of America. And I'll catch you all on the next episode of Spin Cycle America, and you all have an outstanding day.